Episode 16 of the JDV Experience. And joining us is one of the longest tenured NFL draft people in the industry. A guy that he's been doing it so long, now he works for the NFL itself. Chad Reuter. How are you doing tonight, man?
Good. Yeah. I think you just called me old, so that's fine. But that's just the way it goes when you're experienced. That's what I like to say. I'm experienced.
No, there's nothing
Yes.
wrong with being,
Yes.
on NFL.com covering the NFL draft
Yeah.
because you've done it so long.
And a little bit of luck never hurt, so it's good. Yep.
Yeah, the breaks. Everybody knows about that. Football,
Yep.
any sport requires a break of some kind. Normally, hockey, especially. Football's up there. Baseball, you got to hit that. You got a 3 and 10% chance. 30% chance you're going to hit a ball at the plate. So,
it's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day, and no matter what job you're doing, no matter what you're doing, there's kind of two parts. There's a skill level, and then there's just the chance, and you work your way up. You work up the ladder with experience and wisdom and hard work and all that stuff. And then at that level, there's still like a 40 to 60%, right? I mean, like you're, no matter how smart you are, no matter how much you watch prospects, no matter what you do, you're going to be wrong 40% of the time. And things aren't going to go your way 40% of the time. So you just have to work through it. And, and then you get a good break. I think we were going to talk about kind of what my journey has been.
Mm-hmm.
And, I started a website in 2000 when there was not as much coverage of the NFL draft at that point online. Actually, Pro Football Talk, one of the first things that they did is they started rating draft sites. This was in the early 2000s. And there was probably 10 or 15 on there when it started up. And I was very thankful to be one of the ones that had the higher grade. It was called packerdraft.com. And of course, obviously being from Wisconsin, I followed the Packers. I said, I had a job. I'm like, let's do this for a hobby, right? I got sick. I got the flu. So I watched all the bowl games. I just laid on the couch and I just started, watching things, reading things, and, just trying to learn about players. And then I have a background of data analysis, economics. So I use some of that background to study things. And, after a few years, I started getting some interest from teams and from media places. And eventually, about 7 years in, I quit my other job and started working full-time in media. That was around 2008. And I worked with the Sports Exchange, which at that time was doing the CBS sports coverage, doing Lindy's magazines, and then NFLDraftScout.com. I was part of that group for a couple of years. And I was, at one point, I got a phone call from the NFL saying, hey, we're looking for a researcher and analyst, and what do you think? So we just kind of built from there. And that was in 2012, 2011. I don't know. What year is it? So it's about a decade ago now. And so, yeah, I've been there ever since. And, it's a dream job. And I'm just very fortunate to get the right phone call and to be in a position to take it.
No, and that's part of it, I think, right? So having the opportunity present. There's a friend of mine, he always used to tell me, it was when I was first getting started into all of this and, trying to create a career and all this. He said, this goes for any job. This goes for anything that you do. All it takes is one person to say yes. And once you get that yes, you're moving forward.
Yep.
And so how many people are you going to ask the question to get that yes? That's what the determination is. That's what the drive is for. Right. Is that you keep taking those no's, you keep taking those L's and say, okay, where can I get better? Move on. But so It's interesting because you started your own website, as you mentioned, back in 2000. How difficult was it to kind of start a website like that and start telling people about it?
Well, it's certainly not like today. You know, you had to, again, the Pro Football Talk thing was big for me because they were getting started and they were getting a following, so that helped. But honestly, it was through like discussion groups, email discussion groups, and things like that among Packer fans that started kind of getting me rolling. And it was funny, a couple of radio stations saw my stuff, and then I called my local radio station and started talking with the guy, and started building from there. But yeah, it was a lot more difficult. You know, there was no SEO. I mean, there was,
Yeah.
but we didn't know anything about it.
Right.
You know, I mean, it was, you know, you're talking about Yahoo and MySpace and all this other stuff. And frankly, I wasn't doing it to like become like I said at first, it was just a hobby. And then I put stuff out there that a lot of Packer fans, you know, all over the world liked. And so I wasn't necessarily trying to make a career out of it, until I started getting some calls from teams and stuff like that. Like, well, okay, maybe I can do something with this. So yeah, it wasn't, there was no brand. I'm not a brand guy. I you know, I just like doing the stuff I like to do. And if people like talking about it, you know, great. But I'm not a very good self promoter, but it's just, you know, it was not the same as it is now. But I'll tell you that even when people ask me today, how do I get into this? You know, I know it's all about Twitter and TikTok and all this other stuff, but the fact is, you still have to have a product that people can go to and view if you are trying to get employed somewhere. And I still think one of the best ways to do that is you have to have that website, that the repository of information that you've collected. Now, obviously, you produce things on Twitter, you do videos, YouTube video, whatever else you do, but you need to have a repository of that information because it moves so fast that if you're trying to get work through somebody, you have to be able to say, okay, here's like a bunch of links, or here's, you know what I mean? You have to, so I just tell people, look, you start there, you produce information that nobody else is producing. Because if you're just regurgitating the same stuff, it's not going to help. But you know, even though it was an old website, blah, 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 I wrote the HTML myself. It was terrible. It was horrible. It looked terrible, but it was a repository of information and people could see the work. And, you know, I still think that's important today.
Obviously, you know, it's kind of like we can sit here and we can talk football. I mean, there's all kinds of guys out there that you talk with and they know football. And, you know, it could be at the bar. It could be at a convention somewhere that has nothing to do with sports, you know, that you're doing something. It's just people talk football and they're really good at it. But you're right. You got to have some place where people can go and actually see all the different stuff, all the resources, because you can talk with somebody and that's great. But, you know, having that is very important. I agree with that. I think that's very true. So as a Packers guy, I'm assuming you've maintained that Packers fandom.
Yeah, not really. I mean, it's hard when you're supposed to be objective, right? I mean, certainly I follow them more closely than the other 31 teams just because of where I live and because I'm constantly talking to people around here about what's going on in Green Bay. But it's not the same. You know, you have to be objective. You have to evaluate the players. And the same thing with like Wisconsin football, right? I mean, in fact, I tend to be more difficult. I have to stop myself from being more difficult on those guys because I don't want to look like a homer, right? You're trying to evaluate everybody the same. And at times, because I watch 1,000 players, right? I've seen, they're like, oh, what about this running back? I've seen 50 other running backs who are very similar to that guy. But like Wisconsin fans don't see that because they don't watch all, right? So it's interesting to have these conversations and like, well, no, obviously there's exceptions to that when, you know, obviously Braylon Allen's fantastic. What running backs for Wisconsin maybe is a bad example, but you know what I mean? I mean, it's like, yeah, I've seen that, you know, so it's interesting.
Yeah,
It's
right now
interesting.
they got Chaz Malusi, right? Is he, or did he
Yeah.
transfer out?
No,
Yes,
no,
Chaz.
he's because he came in from Clemson. He's going to stick around, and him and Allen are going to share carries this year. You know, guys get hurt too, so like he may be able to get more carries than he thinks, and
Which is why I think Allen got all the playing time last year. He's a sophomore, right?
correct. Yeah, Malusi was out last year with injuries, so at times he started off the year really well.
I remember because that Penn State game, Penn State game was huge.
Yeah.
You know, where it wasn't just him in that game that really, I think Arnold Ebiketie kind of jumped off the screen for a lot of people that weren't tracking him coming over from Temple. But
and Brisker and
Brisker looked great. That was an awesome game. That was a fun game to watch. Yeah. But so got to ask, because this is back in that time, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
What was your draft grade on Aaron Rodgers?
I remember being very surprised that he wasn't one of the top 5 picks. It's so funny, the things that teams will grab onto to not like a player. At that point, people said his arm wasn't that good. I remember writing, this is not true. His arm is just fine, right? But he was thin coming out. I mean, he gained, and as most guys do, right? The first 2-3 years in the league, you get stronger. But the thing that struck out about to me, well, his overall athleticism, obviously, but the tightness of his spiral allowed the ball to go where it needed to go. And, you know, he was a 1 year guy at Cal coming out of Butte. Who knows if teams didn't like his attitude or whatever. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories as to why he fell as far as he did. But the fact is that Alex Smith was really good too. I mean, he was a very good prospect. So I wasn't as surprised that the 49ers went that way, but that Rodgers felt so like, I think Minnesota passed on him twice. And so, you know, and it's just funny how things work out. But I was higher than most on him. And I thought the arm thing, and, you know, yes, Jeff Tedford had him holding the ball up here by his ear. Yes, that took, you know, a month to get him to drop it down to here. It's not that big of a deal. Just one of these things that nitpicking that gets put on these guys all the time. So now I think, you know, was I projecting to be a Hall of Fame quarterback? No, of course not. But you know, I thought it was surprising, and I you know, saw some real talent there.
So you said NFL teams started reaching out to you. When about was that?
2002 or 3 maybe.
So did you end up doing work for NFL teams from time to time?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, I had a different background than a lot of guys in terms of the data analysis and all that. And that, you know, it's come so far. But I remember, so I had sent out information to all 32 teams. I literally looked up the addresses of all the scouting directors and all that, sent them at that time a CD of data, right? That's what you did at the time. And then in Mobile the following year, I went and I introduced myself to like 25 or 26 teams. And I only got 2 really negative, one really negative response, one pretty good brush off. But most guys were like, you know, this is interesting and let's continue talking and that kind of stuff. And you know, I think then like literally 2 people said, oh, you're the numbers guy. You're the numbers guy, right? Analytics wasn't a thing yet. So, but that's what I was at that level. And so I talked to them about, you know, my evaluations of players, my use of data to figure out certain things. And so I built some really good relationships with that over time. Couple of employment opportunities. One, I was judged to be overqualified, and a couple other ones just didn't work out. Another one, I got beat out by somebody who was at the NFL front office the, you know, so it's other stuff didn't work out, but it was okay because you know, after a certain point, you don't want to be that guy who's on the road 300 days a year, right? I mean, you don't want to live that lifestyle. And if you're in your 20s and you want to do that, it's awesome. You don't get paid much, but you're part of it and you can move up and work hard and all that stuff. But, at some point, I didn't really start doing this stuff till I was 28. So, once I hit 35 or so, I was like, no, I'm good. Media stuff is good. I wouldn't trade my job that I have now for anything. So, it's not bad.
No, it's the couple things that kind of stand out to me is number one is when you talked about you cold calling and cold sending stuff.
Yeah.
So many different people that I've talked to, did the same thing. I remember at the combine this year, I talked with Tom Pelissero for a little bit. Just asked him like, okay, how did you start, connecting with people? What was that process like? He said, I got the black book and I just started calling people.
Yeah.
And that's all he did was for, months was he would just call people, cold call them and see who would talk. And I was like, that was another age, obviously, because now we have emails,
Yeah.
now we have Twitter, now we have all the LinkedIn, all these resources to connect with people in different ways.
Yep.
That didn't exist back then. And so it's funny that, like a lot of you guys that are at this point that you've been doing it for long enough now where a lot of people know who you are, you have good jobs, different things like that. Y'all were very similar in your approach. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we were all taught that by our parents. I mean, that's what you did. A guy who eventually became a GM told me in like 2004, I don't care about your resume. Let's talk about your passion. If I'm going to hire you, you got to talk about your passion because everybody's got a resume and that's fine. You check that box, but you got to have the passion. And, and I think, and what the code for passion was, are you willing to put in the work? That's what the code is, because everybody can say they love football, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you willing to go through every team's roster, 200 rosters online, make calls, do whatever, gather the information, evaluate the player, all that stuff that's very tedious. A lot of people say, oh, that's a great job. Yeah, it is a great job. It's also a very tedious job at times, right? In May and June and July, I'm gathering information on 1,000 guys. And I'm trying to watch at least something of as many as I can, hundreds of guys, right? And it's sad to me that the Shrine Game came out with their 1,000 player watch list today, and which has never been done at quite that level. And the sad part is, like, I knew like almost all of them, which is that's disgusting. There's no reason I should know that, right? But that's when you get into this and you just chug at it 12 months a year. That's the passion. So, and of course they had guys that I hadn't looked at and all that stuff, because that's 1,000 people's a lot of people. And then with the transfers and all that other stuff, it's hard to keep track of where guys are at and all that stuff. So that's sort of valuable. And like Phil Steele, NFL Draft Scout, literally reading every team's website, and just absorbing as much information as you can, and just putting in the work as much as you can.
So when you started talking with NFL teams, you're in Mobile, you're face to face. What were some of the biggest things that you learned about the industry early on that's carried over and helped you?
Well, I think, again, with the passion, just the hard work, because there's so many people wanting to get into this, right? I mean, there's just so many, and the problem is that there's a lot of people making these cold calls and sending emails and all that stuff. And you have to be able to stand out, and you have to stand up for what you believe in. And not to just be different, but to have a different take that's still a plausible take. And you're just not making stuff up to get clicks, right? I mean, you're just, you have to stand out, and a lot of people can say they work hard and all that stuff, but you also want to work smart, but you also have to be different in a good way, in a way that teams want to see more from you. And it's not easy to do, especially now. See, back then there wasn't as much out there, so it was easier to stand out, right? I mean, I would get called from an NFL team. How did you know that? How did you know this about this player? I'm like, well, you know, this internet thing is pretty good, so you can actually find out a lot about that. And because in the early 2000s, I'm getting 60-year-old guys talking to me about this, and they didn't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now they're finding a sleeper. It's pretty impossible right now, because it's all out there, so much coverage and all that stuff, which is great. I mean, I think it's great that these guys, no matter what school they go to, they'll get found, and as they should, for putting in that work. So I think the passion, the hard work, bringing something different to the table, standing up for. I think most general managers and scouting directors want guys that will stand up, will stand on the table for players, and not just say whatever you think, right? I mean, I think having that determination to stand up for your guy, and arguing reasonably about it, right? Not being overboard about it, but just saying
this guy's a Hall of Famer and he's going in the 5th round.
Right. No, I'm like, look, 5th round, let's get this guy. I think he can do this, this, and this. And just stating your points in a reasonable manner, I think goes a long way as well. And that's, true with many things. And I think if more people thought about reasonably arguing instead of just standing their ground and not budging, things might be a little different in this country at times. But I think but it's important to fight, reasonably.
The sleeper thing's a really good point too, because when you talk with NFL people, I remember there was a scout that was telling me, he said, look, like Eric Johnson, I had to write up on him last summer as a 5th round pick, for the kid that came out of Missouri State, and he, in the eyes of the media, nobody knew about him until he blew up at I think it was the NFLPA Bowl this year, right?
Right.
So it's great that all these resources are just right there for everybody.
Yeah. Yep.
You have tape. It's as long as you play college football, you have tape.
No.
And they're gonna find you. And then another guy, Cole Strange, right?
Yeah.
I remember last year talking to the it was back in May last year, talking with the University of Chattanooga director of player personnel. He ended up going to Western Kentucky, I think, this offseason. And he's their director of personnel now. But I was asking him, hey, like, anybody that the NFL teams are coming to look, and he gave me a list, but he's like, yeah, Cole Strange, they love him. So the NFL is on top of people, way before anybody else knows.
Well, yeah, they should be, because 32 teams each have 7 or 8 scouts that cover the country, and then they have the national and the Blesto, and they have so many resources put into this that there really shouldn't be any sleep. Guys shouldn't be falling through the cracks, really. Much different than like high school recruiting, things like that. And Chattanooga has a couple guys this year. Another offensive lineman is going to come out this year. He's Senior Bowl guy, and McClendon Curtis is really talented guy. So, it's almost, and it's interesting with the transfers, you see more guys transferring up to get to the FBS level. And they're getting the phone calls now. I mean, once they get into that transfer portal, your teams are all over them. And so now they're stepping up a little bit, but in some ways they don't, I mean, they do it because they want to play at that level, obviously, but like, if they would have stayed at that school, teams would have found them anyway. But it's interesting how guys are getting that opportunity to take that step up, which I think is fantastic. It's a pain for us to keep track of, But the important thing is these guys are getting the opportunity to move up, just like coaches do. Coaches move up levels all the time. And players had not really been able to do that much until recent years. So now they're starting to do it more. And it's great because they get that. They were overlooked in the recruiting cycle and coming out. And now after a couple of years, teams are going to notice them. And it's great. It's a great opportunity for them.
So because this kind of just came up, because you mentioned it, I think this was just a really good question. What is your opinion? As someone who scouts for the NFL draft, as someone who has done it for so long, of the NIL status in college football,
I think
does that help you?
I think it doesn't really help me, but it helps the kids, and that's the most important part. They should be getting what coaches have been getting. They should be getting over the table what they've been getting under the table. It's like, oh my God, money's getting into college. Really? Money's now just getting it? No. Back in, look, this has been going on for many, many years. Money getting put to prospects. And if an adult is stupid enough to give a kid $1 million through an NIL, the kid should take that money. His family should take that money. And, I think that's the fair thing to do, honestly. If a school, look, schools give scholarships to guys for them to come to their school. If boosters want to give a kid $1 million to come to the school that they want him to come to, I don't have an issue with that. A lot of people who say they're free market people don't believe in that, right? Say it's wrong. It's academics. Please. If I had finished 2 years of school and the NFL came and said, no, we want to hire you as our NFL team had come to, so I'm going to hire you as a data analyst. You think I'm sticking around college? No. No chance.
Obviously not. No.
And this is in, the entertainment world. This happens all the time. The business world guys get hired, they do entrepreneurial projects in college and they don't go back to college, or they're signed immediately after college. So look, this is the way it is. And I think, but for me, it doesn't really make a difference because if the NIL hurts the player's ability to contribute on the field, then it's an issue. And we'll see if that becomes an issue down the line. If a guy gets that $1 million as a freshman, walks in the door and doesn't put in the work to be a good player on the field, the first thing will happen is freshmen won't get those deals anymore. But then eventually players will start figuring out that, and so there'll be whoever's in charge of college football in the future, it won't be the NCAA, but however they do that in the future, they may start to limit the amount a little bit more and stuff like that, which is, reasonable. But, then as guys just get older, then they like a guy, let's just say Joe Burrow was awesome at LSU in his first year. And then he comes back for his second year. And if somebody wants to give him, don't go to the NFL, we're going to give you $5 million to stay at LSU. I don't have any problem with that. If he's proven, so we might see more of that, which I would prefer over a freshman getting a big deal. But, everybody wants to make money themselves, but they don't like it when other people make money for things that they don't think they should do. So I'm cool with it.
Yeah, no, that was the point that I liked about it from a scouting point, is the fact, I think we kind of saw it already in the first year. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to say Bryce Young made crazy money just being the Alabama quarterback without he hadn't even started a game yet, and came out there and played extremely well. Yeah. Like I was just looking at him this morning before I took off and did some other stuff, but his placement and his understanding, even when he's late on a throw, he's putting that ball where nobody's going to touch it but the receiver. And I'm just like, golly, it's just another level of quarterback when you're watching that with a college guy. But then you have another guy that made a lot of money last year that was supposed to be a really big prospect. It was that Clemson quarterback. I can't pronounce his last name.
Ugalele or whatever.
Yeah. So he was supposed to be like, it's going to be him and Bryce Young. They were going to dominate college football, and he was not on par. And I think a lot of that had to do with the money. that he
Well,
got.
maybe a step too far. We don't really know that, right? I mean, possibly, but the other thing is that when not every 5-star, 4-star quarterback prospect makes that jump,
Mhm.
effectively. And whether there was NILs or not, we don't really know what the effect.
No. I'll note. It's pure speculation. And it's based off of the 2 games that he started when Trevor missed his freshman year due to COVID.
Right.
And he looked great in those games.
Right.
And looking at those games and then going back and looking at 2021, it was almost a different quarterback at times.
But you have to remember that this happens in the NFL all the time.
Yeah, no.
A guy comes in for a game or two, right? A guy comes in for a game or two and he looks great. Matt Flynn looked awesome for the Packers in preseason and in that one game in Detroit. And he gets beat out by Russell Wilson. I mean, so it's small sample size, right? And especially when a team is really built well and everything's in place. DJ, look, Clemson receivers got hurt last year. Their offensive line was not as good as the year before. There were change. It wasn't the exact same team. And so I'm really interested to see what happens with them this year. And him in particular, to see if he takes that next step. And it's a totally different ball game when you're the guy. And we'll see if he bounces back or not. But I don't know that we can really say it's NIL or not. If we're in the room now, if I'm a scout and I'm talking to coaches, that's one of the first questions that I'm going to ask. Have you noticed his work ethic has gone down since he got the money? But like I said, this isn't the first time money has gotten into college football. These guys have gotten money for years and years and years and years. So
that's true.
But it's I don't like to draw that line there. 1-for-1 correlation, because we don't really know.
Yeah, that's fair. But I did think that NIL would help scouting just because of that, the money aspect. You had Jamarcus Russell years and years ago. We know down the road he was a great guy at LSU. Now we also know that he didn't work well when he got to the NFL.
Yeah.
And and he said that himself too, not just the tape story. I love that story. I thought that's just great. But
I mean, money does change things. There's no question about it. If I won the lottery tomorrow, I might have, I'll say, if I had won the lottery last night, I might have been, getting back to you today and we're like, you know what, buddy, I think I'm out of this. For that. Look, it changes things for people. So it will be a part of the scouting process. But the thing is that if you're a really talented prospect, the competitive fire that you have is not going to be quenched by the NIL stuff. Bryce Young is not going to be changed by the NIL stuff. And because he's a tough kid who plays hard, and something I really like about him, in addition to the accuracy and his athleticism and all that other stuff, and why I don't mind if he's 5'11", 195 pounds either. I think the real players are not going to be set back by that. And the other thing with NIL that doesn't get talked about enough is that guys do great things with this money, and with this, they do all kinds of charitable work. And this has carried forward to the NFL too, right? We don't even hear a lot of the stuff that guys do with their money in the NFL for charitable stuff. So that's been really underrated. And I think people really misevaluated when these guys grow up in great families and they get this money. Their families know, hey, you got to put that to use. It's not just all about you and helping your community and all that stuff. So another really good side benefit of that stuff. And I think, and again, that when you, as a scout, when you see that also helps you understand the character of the young man. So, I think there's some good parts to this NIL stuff in the long run.
Yeah, that's something that we as the media need to do a better job of, is talking about some of these things when we hear about it. Right. Talking about, hey, this kid, he started this foundation, right? And he's a freshman or sophomore in college. Maybe those are some things that we should do as a media better.
And I think we've started to do that. When I put together material for the network, if I catch wind of that or if I see it, I put it in my materials because it's important. Patrick Laird from Cal, the running back from Cal, had a reading program for kids, and I made sure to stick that right in his info for network folks, because that's the kind of stuff that should be talked about more. Now, you say that, but it's just like why doesn't the news talk more about good news, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you do the focus groups, when you get the data, people aren't as interested in that stuff as you think they should be.
Right.
So you have to mix it in ways, but you lose your audience if you're not talking football at some level. There's it has to be a balance of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's just funny that you think, can't the news just be like one good story, one bad story, one good story? But no, if you don't put your bad stories right up front, you're going to lose your audience, and it's really unfortunate. But the data backs it up, but I think the nice thing about working with the network is that people really want those stories. They really want to put those stories out there. So that's why I'm always putting that in and constantly, whether it's for a couple of years, Chase Goodbread worked with us, and I would give him story ideas about different players that he would go out and interview the players and do all that kind of stuff. And again, when we're running our network programming, we try to get these good stories, feel good stories, to show that these guys are doing great things in the community as well. And if you can mix that in with the football talk, and so it's a good mix and balance, then that's really the best of both worlds.
It is. And it's not even just because that they're doing these good things with the money, and hey, that's a good thing, but it's also like awareness, right? It's the fact that, hey, you have this program now. If you have a kid with autism, well, so and so has this, right? That's designed to help, and maybe that incorporates football, whatever that program is,
right?
That's awareness too.
That's right.
That's right. That's the other thing that gets so lost in our modern culture today, is the fact that there's all this good stuff. Like, you have something bad that happens to you, well, there's a million resources out there that's going to help you through that bad time, whatever it is, because people are experiencing the same thing.
And it's great. We have a long way to go, but over the last few years, a lot more talk about mental health awareness.
Yeah.
A lot, and it's becoming more and more accepted to talk about these things, and and really try to live a balanced life and not go for the dollar every minute of every day. It's trying to do more and more of that kind of stuff, and it's good. Hopefully we'll continue in that direction.
Yeah, Simone Biles, I think, opened up a lot of that conversation with athletes specifically, which was that was big. You sit out the Olympics because, hey, I need to take some time for mental health, and it's like, that's some serious stuff, right? And there were a lot of people that were there to ridicule her. Oh, how dare you not, represent your country at the biggest time of the year? No, guys, like, that's the whole point, is they're training nonstop to do this. And if it gets to a point where it pushes you beyond what you're mentally capable of doing, you have to be able to
by
adjust.
The way, if you're not mentally right, then you're not going to perform well anyway. So then you're not putting the best representative of this country out there. So it's gotta all be there. So anyway, so I've got off track a little bit, but
that's good.
We try to get some of that stuff in as well, as the more hardcore analysis and stuff like that, and when we talk about stuff.
So I did want to ask you about your process, because everybody's got a process to this thing, and everybody's process is so different. My process just over the last 5 years has changed drastically, as I've been able to, I'm still young. I'm going to be 26 in December, so I'm still brand new hotshot, figuring out life and all this stuff. Right. But as I've learned time management, it's understanding that there's only so many minutes of the day, and I have to figure out what I want to do with those minutes and how I'm going to be the most productive with those minutes, but also taking care of myself. What does your process look like going into an NFL draft? Okay, the NFL draft, this past May finished up. What is your process? Where do you start?
So the week after the draft is usually, review of things, and I do a post-mortem for my process to see what I want to change, what I want to do differently, blah, blah, blah. What worked, media interviews, all that stuff. Okay.
Mhm.
So probably the following Saturday or Sunday, I created my 2023 draft folder. And I started moving guys because, with the COVID extra year of eligibility, there was a whole slew of
Ton of them.
guys,
Yeah.
right? So maybe when you include guys that didn't come out as underclassmen that I thought might, maybe 300 guys to move from one year to the next. And then just, starting from scratch, looking through all the schools and looking for guys that I knew I'd seen before, and really just starting to build my list, right? And gathering information, and that goes on for, well, I'm still doing it. So May, June, July, I'll really be going through it. And I'll get to 1,000 guys or whatever. Just getting the basic information ready to go, because what you don't want to be doing, and I do this in the summer, like, don't you have summers off? No. because if you have to build all of that between November and January, I mean, forget about it.
Yeah,
right?
you're not going to have any reports at all.
Right. So you get as much information about the first 3 or 4 years, or 5 or 6, with this group, this cohort going through the COVID situation. It's funny, like, how many guys are 7th year players now.
Mhm.
But you have to put in the work ahead of time, so you don't screw yourself over later. So the summer is all building that kind of stuff. And then watching films. Anybody who's seen my Twitter, the 5 people who follow me know that I do a Snap Scout
Snap
series.
Scout. Yep.
Yeah,
Which is great.
And I just try to hit guys that are draftable, but like the big names get plenty said about them. Quarterbacks get plenty said about them. I like to review some of the other guys that maybe could be draftable if everything works out, but maybe aren't at as big a schools or as big a names. I'll do some bigger guys, just maybe that don't have the name that some people like. Last year I did Boy Mafe because I knew a lot of people didn't know who that was, but I knew we'd be talking about. So
Right.
that kind of guy, but then a lot of late round guys, just to give some guys some hype. And I like watching those guys. That's the fun part of the year, is getting to know these guys. By the time March comes around, I'm sick of talking about them. So no, I mean, it's just get to the end of the process, you're ready for the new process to begin.
Yeah.
So during the summers, all the background information, watching as much as I can, to get in a good position for the falls, and produce information for our folks, so that if they're writing stories about college guys, or looking at college guys during the year, they know who to look for and what to look for, and some background on them and stuff like that, so they have that kind of repository available to them. And then in the fall, it's whatever I get assigned. So this last year is very fortunate to do a Senior Bowl watch list report every couple of weeks, talking about some of the better players in the country that were on the Senior Bowl watch list.
Mm-hmm.
No idea what I'll be doing this year, but I'm sure it'll involve some writing on some prospects, and just kind of showing, getting people that are more casual fans, who are the big names, and who do you want to look for when you're flipping through on Saturday, if you have a chance to watch on Saturday. So and just trying to build, and I just keep my eyes open for new guys that come out and kind of break out, to try to gather the information on them. And then bowl season, all-star game season is a trip. We are covering, so NFL Network is carrying, obviously, Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, HBCU All-Star Game,
Mm-hmm.
NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. So we're doing a lot of games now, and so I have to have that information pretty much ready to go for all those games, because the guys that do those games have been watching NFL for the last 4 months. And so they have to get up to speed on who these guys are and stuff like that. So,
Yep.
so that's one of my major roles, is to make sure that that information is good to go. And there's a group of researchers who work really hard for the NFL programming all, fall long in the network, and they're focused on that. So they're happy to have something that they have in their hands when they get done with that. And like, oh man, I'm so glad we didn't have to start this from scratch for this All-Star game, So that's a lot of my job, just to gather that information and kind of give people an idea of where these guys might, where their draft stock might be, and stuff like that. Combine, same thing.
Yep.
Building the same stuff for that. And always looking for new players, and trying to see. Then the pro day information comes in, and that teams, if a guy has a great pro day, he's going to get draft interest. So we're always trying to find that information out to make sure we have the information on those guys. So it's a 12-month process, always looking for new guys, watching as much as you can, and always keeping one eye open for the guy for next year, and to know who we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing too, right? Is keeping up with how it changes.
Yeah,
people pop up on the radar September, October, November that you are not tracking, and you're watching a game. You're like, whoa, how did I not know about this guy yet?
Yeah, especially super senior thing is really interesting, because about 150 guys in my group so far, probably a little bit more than that now, are super seniors. And we had a slew of them last year with Pickett and Brisker and all that. So these guys aren't going away for a couple more years. So you try your hardest to really look at spring rosters and look at information. It's like, okay, I was pretty sure I saw an announcement that guy was going back to school. I just want to make sure. And then, oh, by the way, he may have transferred somewhere else. So then you have to figure that out, right? I mean, it's more difficult than it used to be to track these guys. But yeah, you always have to keep your eyes peeled for new guys. And, either you're watching something and a guy sticks out to you. Oh, he's not in this draft class, but I better file that away and remember, make a mark in my Phil Steele magazine, and circle this guy, like make sure to come back to this guy for next year. So
one of the things that I think I've had to start doing recently, and I kind of started this last year, because what would happen is I would start my new notebook, because I use OneNote, right? I think OneNote's perfect for this. You have all the sections you can break it up by position, searchable, so you pull up everybody at the same school if you're watching a game. It's awesome. So I like using OneNote. And one of the things that I realized, because talking about time management, right?
Yeah.
I made this mistake going from the 2021 cycle to the 2022 cycle, and it was not, as soon as a player announced he was going back to school, deleting the page. And I realized I could just go ahead and start the new notebook and just move that page over, and I have half a scouting report already, but that was one of those hard things I had to learn, right? I know I've watched this guy. I know oh, dang it, I deleted that page.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. I've gone through this enough, but every year, like I said, I go through a postmortem, and every year I come up with new things. I'm like, I should really do this and this, or I should really stop listening to anybody else except myself. All that stuff.
You always forget that at the end of the year. You always forget that.
It's hard. Because there's a lot of good people doing this stuff. And, it's for example, sources are great, but they are human and they cannot predict the future. Okay.
Right.
So a guy calls me and says, this guy's definitely going in round 4. Why don't you have him in your round 4 draft? He's kind of on the bubble for me, Nah, you're crazy. He's going in the 4th round. Guy goes undrafted, right? I mean, this, this is what happens because we can't tell the future. We're always in a time of uncertainty. So you just have to trust what you're doing. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. That's fine. But you don't want to be wrong because somebody else said something that now you're wrong, right? I mean, you just got to kind of go with your own thing. And it's really
the sources thing is the hardest thing, right? Because remember when Lincoln Riley was rumored to be going to LSU,
Yeah.
I had boosters telling me it's done. We have him.
Right.
He's
Right.
coming. 10 years.
Right.
It's going to be like a 90-95 million dollar contract. We have the money already. Like he's coming.
Yeah.
We have him as
And
soon as the season's over.
and they might have thought, right? They weren't
They
lying to
they
you.
100% thought it.
Right. But they
100%.
don't know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know. So you take that information. It's like everything else. It's like everything else you see on the internet, my stuff, anybody else's stuff. You take parts of it and you challenge your own beliefs, but in the end, you have to go back and see what you think is right.
Right. Yep.
And the worst thing you can do, and this is for anything, is say, "Oh, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not going to read it." Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Once a person gets to a certain level, let's just say, a guy who started a website yesterday, maybe not, but just like, and because a lot of people, I see well, I don't see my comments because I don't read those comments, but I see other people making comments about other people, and they say that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. They haven't gone back and studied that guy's track record. They don't know whether he's been better or worse than or the same as everybody else. I've spent a lot of time doing that. And so I know who's often right and who's not often right.
Right.
And but the thing is that everybody isn't that different. We all have strengths and weaknesses and all that stuff. So if you take what you know are strengths from one person and maybe not take their weaker parts, to heart,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of make your own process, you find you do pretty well, I think. So well, I'm just not a conflict guy anyway, so I would never be like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." But I may think that, but then I step back and I say, "Well, wait a minute. Let's look at what this person is saying, and do I really disagree with it? Just because I haven't thought of it before." That's the other thing. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I've never thought of that, therefore it must be wrong." No, that's not how it works.
No.
Just because they thought of it and you didn't doesn't mean it's wrong.
That's why there's 20 people in a scouting department in the NFL, right? Because it's all about having all these different minds, and a good leader is going to sit there and say, here's the plan. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
And that's why, because this is one thing that, we were taught in the military is when you're in let's say a briefing before you go into, a certain mission that you're about to go pull off.
Yeah. Yep.
The leaders, it's their job to think of everything, but they're not going to. That's why they brief you about the mission before you go, is so you can be like, well, that might not work. And they go, that's a good point.
Yeah, right.
You're not going to think of everything.
It's not groupthink, but I think you think as a group, right? I mean, I think but in the end, the sergeant, the general manager, whatever, they have to make the call, right? Mm-hmm. And they have to make the call, but the smart leaders hire smart people around them and listen to what they have to say. And they don't necessarily agree with it. And they don't do what they say. And some people take that as, well, you didn't listen to what I say. No, I heard what you said, but I'm in charge. So I have to make this decision, and I value your differing opinion, but we have to move forward with something. Eventually we have to make a decision. Yeah. And I think that's, that's a smart thing, but I think, again, you have to trust yourself, but you also have to be willing to listen to other people's opinions. And
keep
you
that
also
open
have
mind.
Right. And you also have to review your own stuff and try to get better. Why did I not do this? And if I'm wrong in terms of like a mock draft, we'll just say mock draft. Oh, I was wrong about this part of mock draft. Why was that? Well, because I believed in these players more than other people did, and apparently more than the NFL people did. Okay, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Because I've done enough in the past to show that NFL teams are not always right. Mm-hmm. So just to say, hey, I believed in these guys, they don't, or they have some information about a guy that hasn't come out, and sometimes they'll make a decision based on that. And sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't prove to make sense, and a guy becomes a real bargain. And, just because of not paying attention to football things rather than non-football
Yeah.
things. So, or like Creed Humphrey, I still don't understand why that dude wasn't a first round pick. I don't get it. And I felt like an idiot putting him in the first round when he drops. What am I missing about this guy? Turns out I wasn't missing anything. He's really good. So, and then there's lots of guys that I've had in there that have turned out to be terrible. And that's me and Bill Belichick and anybody else who's ever done this ever has had that happen to them. So that's just part of the deal. But eventually you have to make a decision. You have to go with what you think at the time, just like any decision any of us make in life. You just have to go with the information you have and move forward.
Hope it's the best. Hope it's the best decision you can make. But
right.
No. And then the other thing too that changes every year is schematics, right? Because different things are introduced, different people start. I mean, look at the big slot, for example. Just 2 years ago, that was not a real issue because you had a tight end.
Right.
And then Chase Claypool comes along. Yeah. And I remember this is one of my biggest things that I ever did, right? Like in terms of kind of seeing the direction of the league, was watching Claypool at Notre Dame in 2019 in September going, he's not really an outside guy, but you put him in the slot against those smaller defensive backs and it's going to be torture.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened. Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, is you're always having to evaluate that part of it too, is the game changing.
Exactly. And the funny thing is that people lose the fact that it's not just about the tape. Mm-hmm. The tape is part of the story. It's the most important part of the story, but it doesn't project the future. And when you get a guy who's in a particular scheme in college, he doesn't necessarily do that in the NFL.
Yes.
That's why somebody says, oh, these air raid offensive linemen are no good. Oh, these air raid quarterbacks are no good. They're not going to play that in the NFL. So you have to look at their athleticism, their character, their work ethic, all this other stuff to see if they fit what you want them to do. Mm-hmm. And that's why the combine is more important than people think. And the athleticism is more important than people think, because you're not going to be asked to necessarily to do the same things in college as you are in the pros. And so there's, anybody can look at statistics for a guy and look at a 40 time for a guy and say, oh yeah, he's good. Well, it's more than that. It's more than, the whole is more than the sum of its parts. And I think that's just important to remember. What is this guy going to be? Not what is he today? Yeah. And that's what makes it hard. That's what makes it hard, because people change. They mature, they don't mature, they get bigger, they don't get bigger. That's why it's difficult.
The inexact science of this process. It's a beautiful thing. It just is. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And like you said, getting back to the scheme part, it's so funny how the NFL is the professional level, but it's the least innovative level as well. because I think it's because it's more difficult. It's more difficult to be innovative because guys are bigger, faster, stronger. On the offensive side, you're facing really difficult defenses, fast, strong, smart defenses. And you can't just make stuff up on the fly, right? I mean, it's just, you're just not doing it. So, and when you run out of options, you look to the college game and you say, hey, this guy was really good when they did this in college. Let's do that. And so I think it's just as the players get taught in high school and college to do certain things and it proves to be the best thing that they can do, then the pro game starts moving in that direction. Yeah. And and Kyle Pitts comes to the NFL. You're not going to stick him in line very often, right? You're going to put him on the outside. You're going to put him inside. You're going to move him around because you saw what he could do. And so innovative. That's why guys like Belichick, who are innovative, who are willing to go against the grain when everybody's going to a 4-man front, they go to a 3-man front. When everybody's doing that, they go the opposite because they know there's arbitrage in finding these guys that now other teams don't want, but maybe they do. So it's interesting how schemes and coaching styles and all that stuff change over time, and that affects scouting. But the other thing is, when you're in the media, you're scouting for all 32 teams, which makes it extremely difficult, right?
Yep.
And that's why when I talk about guys, I don't necessarily, like, you have to rank guys because that's what you have to do. But honestly, it's more like, hey, I like this guy in this offense, and I like this guy in this role on defense for this particular, this guy's going to be a 3 tech in this defense. He's going to be a 5 tech in that difference. But he can kick inside an obvious passing situation. Just, you have to have these caveats on what a guy can do and what he can't do. But you focus on what he can do and what role that is. And I try to take big picture look at things. What is his role going to be? Is he a starter? Is he a potential starter? Is he a backup, a solid back, just like a big picture view, and what can he do and what does he need to improve on? And just, it's not, this guy doesn't suck. This guy doesn't, no, it's not really how it works. You have to evaluate a guy, what his role is going to be and how early you want to draft him, and try to take a bigger picture look.
No, I talk about that all the time, and that's it, because it's a very important point, because every year you got people on social media, people that they come after you because they're like, oh, well, you had this guy ranked here above this guy, you're an idiot. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, because I didn't see him going to that team,
right,
and playing that role.
Thing, right? That's the thing, and then or that team, or the team that would have liked that guy, like. Okay, nobody other than the Patriots was going to pick Cole Strange in the first round.
Obviously.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody. Right.
Right.
You're not an idiot for not saying Cole Strange isn't a first round pick. And so that, because you take, what you end up doing is you take the average over 32 teams of the value of that guy. Right. So that's what you end up doing to try to find the mid range of where he can go. And honestly, like, in a lot of, and I haven't been able to work this in yet, but when I've done data studies in the past, all that thing, I typically don't do like what round the guy was in. I'll do what tier was he picked in. Was he a 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 20 to 50? Because the tiers of talent cross over round. Because there's 32 teams doesn't mean there's 32 of the best players. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And so this tier analysis is, I've been doing that for 20 years. And teams have always appreciated to look at that, because that's why you see trades of guys getting from the late second into the early second, because they know that next tier of talent is going to run out in the 40 to 50 range somewhere. And you got to go get your guy. It's funny, the Patriots have always been known as a trade back team. And they do that in the first round. The second round, they trade up a lot.
Yeah.
Because they know for them particularly, they have like 50 guys on the draft board. And so they're all going to run out. But it's just really, you have to know where those breaks in talent, general breaks in talent are. And they don't really change a lot from year to year. It's pretty consistent. So there's a lot of analysis. It's a lot of fun to look at this kind of stuff and treat it like a puzzle. That's all that mock drafts really are to me. It's just a puzzle.
Right.
But you don't know what it is. Basically, the way I describe a 7-round mock draft when I do radio interviews, like, how could you possibly do a 7-round mock draft? Well, the way I look at it is, you get a picture you get a puzzle from the store. It's 1,000 pieces, and it's like a Scottish castle. Okay. That's what the box says. And you open it up and you start putting it together, and you're like, this isn't a Scottish castle. This is dogs playing poker, right? Because you get in the middle of this thing, you're like, what is going on? How can I get this here and this guy here? Oh man, this guy's falling to the 5th round. That can't be. So you're always playing around with it. And then you finish and you find out that you've built a picture of a bunch of dogs outside a White Castle. And that's what you end up with. You don't end up with what you think you're going to have and what it looks like halfway through. You end up with something totally different, and you just have to submit it eventually, no matter how many more changes you want to make.
I've got two more questions for you. And the first one is to play off that data analysis, because I like to do some data analysis myself. I don't the tier breakdown is fascinating. I've never done that before, and I definitely think I'm going to explore that a little bit.
Yeah.
I like looking at some other type like trends, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of trends that the media will hype at times.
Yeah.
I remember, when Richard Sherman and the Legion of Boom was a big thing.
Yeah.
It was, the new prototype cornerback is going to be the tall, lanky cornerback. And you saw
Yeah.
all these guys go second, third round, and they didn't pan out. So I was I did some data analysis this past off season, and it was interesting. I used some, public feedback and stuff. I said, hey, who are the top 5 corners in the NFL right now? And I ended up with a list of, about 15 guys, right, that are very, very good, very, very good corners in the league.
Yeah, they're all 5'10", 190 pounds.
Yeah, there wasn't a single one that was over 6'1", and that was the thing, was it was kind of like, you get to a point where, what is that? So then at that point, it's like, well, let me look at the tape. Let's look at some different stuff. And I kind of think that you have a taller corner, 99 times out of 100, they're not going to be able to react fast enough to play in man coverage, which everybody has to play now, right?
Right.
And so I like data analysis for that kind of stuff, right? Because you can find a trend. You can kind of see, okay, well, Richard Sherman is an outlier. I mean, he still can't play man coverage, as everybody in the NFL knows after that Super Bowl where he got toasted in the fourth quarter. But it's like, maybe there's a pad level issue right there where, they're so tall, they can't get low enough to react to a cut or something.
Yeah. But the thing is I don't think where you can go wrong on this stuff is saying, because Richard Sherman can't do it, no 6'2" cornerback can do it. Right. I mean, I think people take it a step too far. And I think it's interesting to think about. Like, for example, the Steelers, I think, have signed like Witherspoon and somebody else. I can't think of the top of my head, tall. Well, of course, they selected Artie Burns early. So you don't even necessarily think of the Steelers as picking those kind of guys, but they have picked them if they think they have the short area agility to make it work on their defense, and their scheme allows them to do that, right? If they're playing more zone, and that's the other thing, right? Man versus zone. Well, everybody's playing a little bit of everything. I mean, and some teams do more than others, and I'll look at stats in terms of what teams are running more cover 3 versus cover 2 versus cover 1, blah blah blah, just to get an idea. But it's not like they're running 80%, man 1 versus most teams do not do that. They try to mix it up. Right. So in the end, you have to pick the corners that no matter what their size is, that can find the ball, first of all, and that can be any size corner. Can you find the ball in the air? Are you physical? Do you have the short area agility and the intelligence? Can you read the routes? Can you do what you have to do? So it's interesting to look at that kind of stuff. But when you're evaluating players, you don't want to get into the habit of saying,
"Oh, he's 6'2", he's disqualified." Right.
I mean, and you see it with Patrick Surtain. There's a guy in this upcoming year's draft, Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M. He's 6. Well, they list him at 6'3". He's probably 6'2" and change, 200 pounds, very similar to Patrick Surtain. A&M plays him in the slot a lot, or in the box, and they list him as a safety. He's a guy that if he has the short area, I would be very interested to see him outside at corner in the NFL. So, that hits a couple of things. One, think about different scheme fits for a guy. And 2, don't box a guy in a particular thing because of his size or his speed or whatever, because you're going to miss out on guys. And, there's always been, teams have always had like, we're not drafting a guy in the first 4 rounds who's shorter than 5'9".
Yeah.
And the Patriots are like, we're not drafting a guy taller than 5'9" ever. No. I'm glad I got you a spit take on that one. I was hoping.
I think that's the first time I've ever done that.
But no,
on the show.
but certain teams like certain guys, right? That's just the way it is.
Yep.
But when you're evaluating, you don't want to pass up on a Marcus Jones from Houston, who I had put in the third round of my mock drafts forever to the Patriots because it just made a lot of sense, right? That's the guy they like.
Yeah.
Returner, 5'8", really physical, slot guy, which they struggled with last year, and just a better version of Miles Bryant. And it made a lot of sense for them to take him. And I think that's smart in a way, even though they've struggled with Javier Arenas. They've picked some guys that hasn't worked out, but that doesn't mean that you stop taking a player of a certain size and speed just because another guy didn't work, right? The same with don't take Alabama running backs. Well, that's worked out okay more recently, right? I mean that's just like Florida State defensive ends used to be a thing, and like you don't. Every guy is different. You look at trends to see some things, but in the end, you got to judge the guy on what he does. And but the trend is your friend. I think it's really important to know what's happened in the past when you're looking in the future. That's as they say, the past is the most accurate predictor of the future, whatever that saying is. I can't come up with right now. Past is prologue, however you want to say it. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be a prisoner to the past, but you have to be aware of it and to when you see things. And that allows you to predict things a little easier. I look at trades all the time for mock drafts, right? I do trades, and I've looked at a lot of trade history. And this year I'm like, my first mock draft, I'm like, the Eagles are trading up for Jordan Davis. And I think I kept that most of the way through. Maybe on the last one I didn't, but I still had them taking him or something like that. Mm-hmm. And just because that makes a lot of sense for me. And I saw the trade history. I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. The Chiefs would trade up for a corner and not a receiver. And I had them trading up at one point for a receiver. And then I saw the receiver was going to go higher. So I didn't. And I had them trading up for a corner. Can't remember if it was Elam, maybe, because I had McDuffie going a little earlier to somebody, whatever. So, you have to look at that stuff, but you can't be a slave to it, because a guy like Trent McDuffie, for example, and Roger McCreary, a guy had not been picked in the first round with under 30-inch arms in the last 20 years. Okay. So McCreary was the one that everybody ripped on for his lack of length.
Yeah,
but
I remember
McDuffie
that.
Wasn't over 30 either. So, and I figured McDuffie would go in the first round, but I wasn't sure how high because of that length of length. And he's a really good player, so I'm glad he did. But so you got to be aware of it, but you can't, you have to take things, as they're in front of you and not be a slave to that.
That's a great point too. And yeah. Because helmet scouting's always been a thing. I mean, yes. People are always, oh yeah, he's an LSU corner, he's going to be great, and
that's so hard to get away from. It's so hard. Like Keyshawn Butte, there are times where there are plays where you're like, wait, is this Chase or is this Butte? What am I looking at here? Mm-hmm. And there's slightly different builds and all this stuff, but it's really easy to fall into that trap. And it has some merit in terms of schools recruit certain kind of guys, so you get some of that, but you can't. Bryce Young is nothing like Tua, and not in a good or bad way. They're just not the same. They're not the same player at all.
Totally. So no, it's funny. It's funny that you specifically mentioned that, because I remember he played. What was it? It was an all-star game. The Under Armour, I guess. It used to be the U.S. Army game. So it's not Under Armour. It used to be the U.S. Army. That was the first year as Toyota, and I was like, I can't believe I'm saying this right now. The Toyota All American game just does not ring right. Yeah. But I remember he played that game. He started. He was on the white team, and I called my buddy, who's a big Alabama guy. I'm telling you, Bryce Young is Tua 2.0. He's better. Because they had the similar build, they had the similar arm talent, in the athletic ability. But no, it's a good point. No, he's a lot better than Tua, I think.
Yeah, and I liked Tua for a variety of reasons, but he does different things, and you have to do those different things to put him in a way to succeed. But like Bryce, the ball just comes out so fast. It just comes out so fast, and he's a lot of fun to watch. But so helmet scouting is always a thing you have to watch out for. But teams still, it's human nature. Wisconsin offensive linemen will get drafted higher than you think, right?
Yeah, always.
People thought I was crazy for putting like Logan Bruss in the top 100.
He went top 100.
He went top 100, and then just because certain schools have certain things that they're known for, and their NFL teams trust them with that kind of stuff. And it's really hard to get away from that. Pitt has a junior defensive tackle, Kalijah
Cansey, yes,
right?
Cansey. Oh,
how can you not look at that guy and think of
Aaron Donald? Yeah, see,
I
was already on it,
right? It's impossible.
Yeah,
but he's not Aaron Donald. But dang it, he looks like him. It's so hard to not fall into that trap. But because we're all, but really talented player. I mean, a lot of fun to watch. So it's hard. It's hard getting away from those biases.
The last question I've got for you, and then we'll wrap it up. But the PA behind you, you have a football, you have a helmet, what appears to be assigned. What is that?
That is my team that I had the privilege to coach a couple of years. My stepson played high school football, very small school. We had 35 guys on the team, which is actually a pretty big number considering that there was only probably 200 kids in both high schools combined, which was a co-op. Very small communities. There's like 1,700 people total living in the two communities. But it was one of the best experiences of my life. Anybody watching this, if you ever think about coaching, do it 100%. Just great being involved with the kids. And the helmets from youth football. And then I have a football down here that I was given by the kids after my stepson graduated and I knew I wasn't going to be coaching anymore. It's just one of the best experiences ever.
That's awesome.
It was great. I'm not an X to nose guys necessarily. I was more of a, obviously like because I'm so svelte, I was working with the DBs and wide receivers because that's the kind of build. We had a former college offensive lineman working with the line, so I didn't really need to do that. But it was so fun just to be able to work, being able to put the things that I've learned into practice was great. And more than just like talking to kids about it on the side or whatever. It was really fun to be able to do that. It's so great when you teach somebody something and they do it. And it's just the best feeling. We scored a touchdown. We worked on scramble drill. And look, we're an option offense. In one year, we were a total option offense. The other year, we had a good quarterback, so we threw the ball a bit more, right? But we're still running the ball because small town Wisconsin, that's what you do.
Right.
Big Ten country, that's what you do.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, let's work on scramble drill. And of course, the kids are like, what are you talking about? So we did some scramble drill work. The next week, we had a kid that was running a shallow cross, and the quarterback went out of the pocket, and the kid took off downfield because he saw him scrambling, and it was a touchdown. And it just made me so happy because you just listen, and you put it into practice, and it's so great. And it's so great. So it was an amazing experience. And,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. That is actually awesome. Chad, it's been a pleasure having you on, being able to just talk some ball and get into some other stuff too, off to the side, going down little rabbit trails. That's what we do on this. If you ever get a chance and you go listen to some people, Mark Jarvis was really great on the show. Emery Hunt was really great on the show. It's like we just go down rabbit holes sometimes.
Oh, you had Emery on here? Well, I should have wore a suit and tie.
We talked about that. I said, yeah, you're always the best dressed man. No matter where you go, you'll always have that.
Yeah, you're lucky I even put on a shirt that looks decent. Usually,
well, I mean, look at me. I'm total homer today, going Tennessee. So
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, I appreciate you having me on. It was fun talk.
Yeah. Go ahead, give the listeners your Twitter handle. So if they're not already following you, they can do that. Where they can find all your stuff.
Yeah, NFL.com's where all my stuff is at. My Twitter handle is Chad underscore Reuter, Chad Reuter. And yeah, that's my main social media thing. But honestly, like I'm on there every second I'm on there. I'm not working, so I'm not posting a lot right now other than my Snap Scout series. And you can use Snap Scout 23 hashtag Snap Scout 23. You see the guys that are on there. I think I've got like 145, or including some leftovers from last year.
I'll be
Um,
honest. I never turned your mentions off, so I get it. I mean, your notifications. So every time you tweet one, I'm like, oh, who is this?
yeah, so but yeah, I mean, and look, I do a lot of jokes, and because people are so serious and so negative that like I just feel like I have to, like in Ghostbusters 2 when they had the river of negativity running through the under the streets of New York, and then everybody sang a song at the end and all this stuff. Like I like to be that guy that just was like, hey, let's tell jokes, let's have fun, let's support each other, retweeting other people's stuff. If people are doing great things, saying congrats, do that great thing. So that's what a lot of my tweets are. But when I have football things to say, I'll say them. So yeah, that's what my Twitterverse is.
Yeah, appreciate the time. If you got a second, hang around when I stop recording, and I'll pass on some stuff to you. But
All right.
always a pleasure to talk to you. Always
Thanks, John.
enjoy it. Always enjoy your stuff. So thanks a lot for the time.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for tuning into my channel and checking out the content. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow us on your favorite podcast platform as well.